Good morning, Year 3-4. It's Mrs. Martin here, and I'm going to talk us through our writing lesson today. So today we are going to be looking at boxing up our story and planning our innovation. So remember, our innovation is where we use our model text to write our own version of the story. So can you please start by writing the date and LO for me, and then have a think about what sentence types we have done so far this unit that we might be able to use within our story. Okay, so first of all, we're going to start by practicing our story map as we do every lesson. This will really help us to make sure that we have all of those sentence types really firmly ingrained in our brains, ready for writing our own story. So if you go onto our class page under Thursday, the 7th of January, and have a go at our story map for us to begin with. Pause the video here. Okay, so let's have a think first of all about what we have to do every single time we write. What is in our Every Time I Write toolkit? Have a think for me about all of those things your teacher is always reminding you about that you have to include within your writing. Pause the video here and have a quick think for me. I wonder if you managed to come up with all of these. So the ideas that I had was, of course, every single sentence has to start with a capital letter. We need our wonderful joined handwriting that we are all getting really, really good at. Remembering that our ascenders need to go to the top of the line, our descenders need to go underneath the line. We need to see if we can include some tricky vocabulary within our writing. So no more sets. Now we're in Year 3-4. We've got to cut those synonyms instead. Of course, we write in our paragraphs, don't we? And we'll be modelling that to you as we do our shared writing this week. All of our sentences have to end with some kind of punctuation. Often that's a full stop, though sometimes it could be an exclamation mark or a question mark. Of course, this week as well, we've been looking at our inverted commas and how we use those around our speech. Other than our Every Time I Write toolkit, though, we've been looking at some particular sentence types within this unit. I wonder if you can remember any of the sentence types that we have done while we have been doing our Losing Tail unit. Have a pause here and see if you can remember any of the sentences we looked at last week. Well done if you had any of these. Of course, we had our two-pair sentence. Now, one of the examples of a two-pair sentence from our story map was mean and grumpy, selfish and wicked. She was always bossing him around. So we've got our two-pair sentence. We've just recently looked at using a colon to introduce a list as well. So we had two of these within our model text. There was one at the start where we were describing Grandma and what she was like. And there was one in our problem, our resolution, where George was making a new concoction for Grandma. And we listed all of the different ingredients that he needed to put into it. We had our speech, and some of our speech included a speech verb action, so where we put some extra information after our speech to show what the character was doing. And then lastly, we had a look at our subordinate conjunctions, so where we were adding that extra detail using our I saw a wubba words. Remember, your sentence could start with a subordinate conjunction, as well as having your subordinate conjunction at the end. So these are all the sentence types that we've looked at this time, but the other ones that we might find within our model text that we've previously looked at include fronted adverbials, emotion comma, and our Eddingly openers. And of course, as well, we looked at how to use show, not tell. So rather than saying George was frightened, we showed the reader that George was frightened because maybe his palms were sweaty, maybe his heart was racing, maybe he had no idea what was going to happen next. We're going to see if we can use all of these different sentence types when we are planning and boxing up our story today. So now we are planning our story, we need to think about what is going to happen in it. So we need to consider who the main character could be. In our story, it was a small boy called George. Who could be the main character in our story? Then we need to think about what they might lose. Now remember, in our model text, they lost Grandma's medicine, didn't they? But our character isn't going to lose Grandma's medicine. They're going to lose something else instead. When they've lost this item, they're going to have to create a new version of it. Now that might involve them inventing something. It might involve them having to go off and find it somewhere else. But we have that twist at the end of our story as well. So when George created this new medicine for Grandma, he had no idea that it was going to turn her into a nice person. I'm going to have a think now then about who my main character might be. I have a few ideas for my story for the main character. I think the main character might be a young boy, maybe called, what should we call him? Pete. So it could be a young boy called Pete. Who else could I have as my main character in my story? Well, of course, it might be a little girl. A little girl named Sarah. Maybe it could be a teacher. Maybe our main character could be called a teacher. Called Mrs. Davis. So can you have a think for me about who your main character might be within your story? Now, based upon who your main character is, we can then think about what they might lose. Now, I'm thinking at the minute that I quite like the idea of my main character being a teacher. I wonder what my teacher could lose within our story. Now, perhaps the teacher could lose the key to the classroom. Oh no, all the children would be locked outside in the cold and they wouldn't be able to get back in. So perhaps they could lose the key. I was also thinking that perhaps they might lose something belonging to the head teacher. Maybe they might lose the head teacher's, maybe she's got some special tea bags. Have her favourite type of tea that she likes to drink, or he likes to drink. Maybe our character might lose those and have to create her own tea bags. I really like this idea actually of the head teacher's tea bags being lost and the teacher needing to make her a cup of tea. And perhaps I need to create some new special tea bags. So how could our character, our teacher, make the head teacher some special tea bags? What might they do? I'm thinking that perhaps they might raid the resources room looking for ingredients. Might put maybe some paint in there. Maybe they could put in some glue perhaps. They might put in some food colouring that they find, lots of things. Okay, I think I've got my ideas so far. So I think my story is going to be about a teacher who loses her head teacher's special tea bags. So the teacher, being a bit worried, decides they have to go and create some special tea bags of their own. And they might raid the resources room looking for some ingredients. But when the head teacher drinks this new special tea the teacher has made them, something is going to happen. Like in our story, where George's grandma drank the concoction and she turned into a nice person. Well, I think my head teacher is going to be a nice person already. But I want something to happen to her when she drinks this special tea. I wonder what could happen to her. Oh, lots of different things could happen to her. Maybe her hair might turn blue. Goodness me, can you imagine giving a head teacher some special tea and their hair turning blue? Right, it's your turn now. So have a think about your story. Who's your main character going to be? What could they lose? How could they create a new version of that lost item? And what special thing is this new lost item going to do? Pause the video here for me and have a think about your story. Now we've come up with all of our wonderful ideas for our story, we need to have a go at planning it and thinking about what is going to happen in each of our sections of our story. Now, our opening and our build-up needs to introduce the main character and describe the character that they're going to give the lost item to. So I'm going to have some speech to introduce my main character. Remember, my main character was Mrs. Davis, who was going to be a teacher in a school. I think I'm going to start my story maybe by somebody asking Mrs. Davis if she remembered to make the special tea for the head teacher. So I'm going to leave my inverted commas. Then I'm going to include my speech. Mrs. Davis, if you remember to make what we call our head teacher. Mrs. House, a cup of tea. Now, this is a question, so I need a question mark in my inverted commas. Mrs. Davis, did you remember to make Mrs. House her cup of tea? Asked Mr. Snake. So we've got some speech at the start to introduce our main character. I know straight away that there's going to be something about a cup of tea that goes missing and that my main character is going to be Mrs. Davis. So who does the main character need to give the last item to? Well, here I'm just going to write some notes. So I knew that Mrs. Davis needed to make the head teacher, Mrs. House, a cup of tea using her special tea bags. So what is the lost item? Of course, the lost item was the tea bags. Going on to introduce a list describing the character he or she needs to give the lost item to. So remember, we said our character didn't have to be really horrible like Grandma. Now, if we look back at our model text, it said George did not like Grandma. She had rotten brown teeth and a small puckered mouth. I think our head teacher actually is going to be very, very nice. So rather than George did not like Grandma, I'm going to put Mrs. House was the nicest head teacher you could ever meet. Then I'm going to put my colon. I'm going to write my list describing why she was the nicest head teacher you could ever meet. Mrs. House was the nicest head teacher you could ever meet. She always had a huge smile on her face, never gave out attentions, and what else might make her the nicest head teacher you could ever meet? Mrs. House was the nicest head teacher you could ever meet. She always had a huge smile on her face, never gave out attentions, and met all of the children. extra playtime. That sounds like something a nice head teacher would do. Right, now we're on to our problem. So Mrs. Blake goes to find these extra special tea bags, but what has happened to them? I think perhaps Mrs. Blake realizes she accidentally used the tea bags in an art lesson, and now there are none left. Okay, how does the main character feel? Now, I don't know if it would make much sense for our main character to feel scared here, because actually the head teacher is a very nice person. I think perhaps our main character feels embarrassed, because they, after all, were the one that accidentally used up all of these tea bags. So I think they're going to be embarrassed. Now, I'm not going to say Mrs. Blake was embarrassed. Oh, I changed the name here. Of course, it was Mrs. Davis, wasn't it? Oh, goodness me, Mrs. Martin. Mrs. Davis, getting all my names confused. And Mrs. Davis realizes she accidentally used the tea bags in an art lesson, and now there are none left. I think she's going to feel embarrassed about the fact that she's accidentally used up all of Mrs. House's tea bags. Now, if she's feeling embarrassed, I'm not going to write Mrs. Davis was embarrassed. I'm going to show the reader that instead. So if we're feeling embarrassed, I know when I feel embarrassed, my cheeks go red. So I think I might put Mrs. Davis's cheeks. And what else might happen to her? She's feeling embarrassed. Maybe her palms began to sweat. And I think I'm going to finish it off with a question at the end. Mrs. Davis's cheeks turned red. Her palms began to sweat. What on earth was she going to do? So we've got our opening and our build-up, all about needing to make this cup of tea for the head teacher. But, Mrs. Davis has accidentally used all of the special tea bags within an art lesson. Let's go on to our resolution now. So, our character needs to create a new lost item. I think that our character, I've got to get the name right, not get them in a muddle again, Mrs. Davis. What is she going to do, Mrs. Davis? Mrs. Davis goes into the resources room and tries to make her own tea bags using things that she can find. Okay. Now our emotion comma. Now we're going to say how Mrs. Davis is feeling. I think at this point she might be feeling a little bit anxious. So I'm going to put anxious comma. Now you can complete the rest of this sentence if you want to, but you don't have to. Remember, this is all just your plan, so we have all of these ideas to put into our story when we begin innovating it tomorrow. Anxious comma. Mrs. Davis stirred a mixture of fruit of best. I might choose to use the sentence when I innovate it, but I might decide to change it. We will see. Then we've got a colon to introduce a list. So remember now, this is going to be the list of the ingredients that we need to make that lot. In our model text, the list said, grabbing the biggest saucepan he could carry, he headed to the bathroom and began to fill the pan with the most glorious items. And then they listed the items afterwards. I think I'm going to magpie quite a lot of this sentence to put within my own story. So I'm going to start my sentence with grabbing. I think I'll still stick with a big saucepan, so that's a good idea. So heat it up then if they wanted to. Grabbing a huge saucepan. Grabbing a huge saucepan, Mrs. Davis headed to the resources room. Started making a list of things she would need to put into the special tea. Now, what things might you put into this special tea? Perhaps some food colouring, maybe some PVA glue, and perhaps what else might you find in the resources room that you might need to put into this tea? Maybe some glitter. Now, I've not included lots of adjectives in this, but I know that when I come to my innovation, I'm going to need to add in that extra detail. I might decide that I'm going to change some of the things in my list as well. Okay, so she has tried to make her own special tea bags. Now, she's going to give this special tea to the head teacher in Mrs. House, who is going to be very thankful because she's not going to know that it's not her real tea. I think our lovely head teacher is going to say, "Thank you, Mrs. Davis," inverted commas, exclaimed Mrs. House. I might have this as split speech actually. This is the nicest tea I've ever had. Okay. So we've got some speech of the main character being thanked for finding the lost item. Of course, in my story, she didn't actually find the lost item. She had to make some of her own. Now we're going to use a two-pair sentence because remember that Mrs. House's hair is going to change colour from drinking this special tea. So how might Mrs. Davis feel as she watches her hair change colour? I think she might be shocked and what else could we say? Surprised and surprised and she might be a little bit amused as well. Shocked and worried, surprised and amused. Mrs. Davis watched as Mrs. House seemed to transform in front of her. I'm not giving everything away here. I'm going to put it in my twist ending. And my twist ending is going to be Mrs. House's hair turns blue. So we're going to be able to add all of this detail in when we come on to writing our story. So we had in our plan that our main character was going to be Mrs. Davis, and she needed to make a cup of tea for the head teacher. But, oh dear, she accidentally used up all of the tea bags in an art lesson that she was doing, and now there were none left. This made her very embarrassed. She wasn't scared because this head teacher was very, very nice. But because she was so embarrassed, she tried to make her own version of the special tea. She, of course, didn't have all of the ingredients, so just made some kind of concoction using the ingredients that she could find in school. Mrs. House, being the loveliest head teacher you ever did meet, drank the cup of tea, and actually it was delicious. But to Mrs. Davis's surprise, she watched as Mrs. House's hair turned blue, perhaps from all the food colouring that she had put in. Okay, I would like you now to have a go at planning your own story. Think about your main character. Think about what it is that they are going to lose and how they will then create a new version of that item, and then have a think about what your twist ending could be. Now try to put in as much detail as you can think of into your plan, because we will use it when we start innovating tomorrow. But we might change a few bits, so don't worry when we start innovating if you decide that you want to change some of your ideas around.